Greg Green had always considered Carl Sh. Zayx a weirdo, but he certainly never thought he'd be inheriting the guy's entire estate, including his 3 wives. He sighed, meticulously aligning the edges of the documents on his desk. Another day, another mountain of spreadsheets. He glanced at the clock, 7:52 a.m. Just enough time to brew a pot of Earl Grey before Brenda from accounting cornered him with her latest conspiracy theory about alien lizard people controlling the Federal Reserve. He loved his job, he really did, but Brenda's water cooler talks were becoming a daily ordeal. A crisp, official-looking envelope landed on his desk with a soft thud, disrupting his routine. The return address was a law firm he'd never heard of, specializing in interstellar probate. Greg frowned, carefully slicing open the envelope with his letter opener. Inside was a formal legal document, its language dense and labyrinthine, filled with terms like extraterritorial jurisdiction and xenobiological dependence. It was a notification of inheritance from one Carl Sh. Zayx. Greg racked his brain. Carl Sh. Zayx. The name tickled the back of his memory. Ah, right. That eccentric guy he'd met at the local sci-fi convention a few years back always wore that ridiculous tinfoil hat. As Greg deciphered the legalese, his eyes widened in disbelief. The inheritance was substantial. No, that was an understatement. It was astronomical. Assets across multiple star systems, holdings in interstellar corporations, a private moon orbiting Kepler 186 f. The sheer scale of it was incomprehensible. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. This was far beyond anything he could have imagined, let alone manage. How was he, a mid-level accountant from Boise, Idaho, supposed to handle assets spread across half the galaxy? He scanned further down the document, and that's when he saw it. In addition to the aforementioned properties and holdings, the estate of Carl Sh. Zayx also includes provisions for the care and well-being of 3 designated dependents, identified as Nova, Lyra, and Thea Sh. Zayx, recognized as wives under Elysian law. Wives. 3 wives. Greg stared at the document, his carefully constructed world of spreadsheets and tax returns crumbling around him. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a sitcom waiting to happen. Driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a desperate need to understand what he'd gotten himself into, Greg fired up his computer and searched for Carl Sh. Zayx. The results were enlightening. Carl wasn't just some eccentric convention-goer. He was a highly respected and somewhat controversial figure in Elysian society, an alien civilization Greg had only encountered in poorly written science fiction novels. Carl was a pioneer in interspecies relations, a brilliant inventor, and apparently a polygamist. Despite his reservations, Greg felt a strange sense of obligation. Carl had, for whatever reason, chosen him to inherit this mess. He owed it to the guy to at least try to sort things out. With a sigh, he contacted the law firm and reluctantly agreed to travel to Elysium to settle the estate. A few weeks later, Greg found himself boarding a luxury space cruiser designed for interspecies travel. The plush seats, the zero-gravity swimming pool, the onboard chef specializing in xeno cuisine, it was all a bit much for a guy who usually packed a ham sandwich for lunch. The journey was long, but eventually, the cruiser descended through the swirling, iridescent clouds of Elysium. Greg pressed his face against the viewport, marveling at the landscape below. Advanced technology was seamlessly integrated with nature, sleek silver structures nestled among lush, bioluminescent forests. It was a far cry from Earth's more industrial aesthetic, a place where progress and harmony seemed to coexist. As the cruiser docked, Greg was greeted by Nova, one of Carl's wives. She was an Elysian, tall and graceful, with shimmering, opalescent skin and eyes that seemed to shift colors with her emotions. Her voice was melodic and soothing as she extended a hand in greeting. "Welcome to Elysium, Greg Green. I am Nova Sh. Zayx. It is Unusual, but we are grateful you have come. She explained that Elysian marriages often involved multiple partners, a concept that was still swirling in Greg's brain like a poorly mixed cocktail. Nova led him through the bustling spaceport, introducing him to the other two wives. Lyra was a stoic and muscular Elysian warrior, her body adorned with intricate tattoos that seemed to pulse with a faint, inner light. Thea, on the other hand, was a brilliant but socially awkward Elysian scientist, her antennae twitching nervously as she mumbled a greeting. The sheer variety of personalities and appearances was a stark contrast to Greg's carefully curated, beige existence back on Earth. That evening, during a formal Elysian dinner, Greg unintentionally committed a cultural faux pas. Complimenting Lyra's strength, he remarked that she was built like a brick house. The words hung in the air, heavy with unintended offense. Lyra's expression darkened, and Nova subtly cleared her throat. Greg had apparently stumbled upon an Elysian taboo. Comparing a warrior's strength to inanimate objects was considered deeply demeaning. Later that night, as Greg reviewed Carl's financial records, he noticed some discrepancies. Small amounts at first, but they added up. Suspicious transactions, untraceable transfers, missing assets. Something wasn't right. He felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't just a matter of settling an estate. There was something else going on here. Nova, sensing his concern, entered the study. "Is something troubling you, Greg?" she asked, her voice tinged with genuine worry. "I've noticed some irregularities in Carl's accounts," Greg replied, gesturing to the glowing datapads scattered across the desk. "I think someone might be trying to exploit his death." Nova's eyes narrowed. "Carl had enemies," she said softly. "Those who envied his success, those who disagreed with his unconventional methods. They might see this as an opportunity." She then added, "Carl was also working on a revolutionary invention before his death, something that could drastically alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The plans are missing." The pieces were starting to fall into place. The financial irregularities, the missing invention, the powerful enemies. Greg began to suspect that Carl's death may not have been accidental. He looked at Nova, her face etched with concern, and realized that he was no longer just settling an estate. He was stepping into a world of intrigue, danger, and potentially a whole lot of trouble. Greg, fueled by the discrepancies, barely slept that night. By morning, the bags under his eyes were prominent enough to warrant concern from his coworker, Janice. "Rough night, Greg. You look like you wrestled a grog bear." "You could say that," he muttered, already pulling up Carl's accounts on his ancient Earth standard monitor. "I'm requesting a full audit. Something's not right." The request rippled through the Elysian bureaucracy, causing barely perceptible tremors in the gleaming towers of Neo-Elysium, and more noticeably, raising eyebrows among Carl's associates. Later that day, Nova hesitantly approached Greg as he hunched over the data streams. Her iridescent skin shimmered in the soft light of the office. "Greg," she began, her voice a melodic hum. "I could assist you with the audit. I have some familiarity with Elysian financial regulations." There was a subtle challenge in her tone and assessment. Greg looked up, surprised. "Really? That would be incredibly helpful. I'm drowning in Quatlus and Glorgons, no offense." Nova's lips quirked in a slight smile. "None taken. Elysian currency can be perplexing." "Besides," she added, her gaze lingering a moment longer than necessary, "I suspect Carl would want his affairs handled with diligence." However, not everyone was so forthcoming. Lyra, arms crossed, watched them from the doorway. Her chitinous armor gleamed, reflecting the light like a predatory insect. "Are you certain this audit is necessary, human?" Carl entrusted his affairs to capable individuals. "Are you questioning their integrity?" Greg sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm just trying to understand things, Lyra. There are inconsistencies. I owe it to Carl to investigate." Lyra's mandibles clicked softly. "Or perhaps you are simply after his wealth." Before Greg could retort, Thea glided into the room, her multi-jointed limbs moving with an almost unsettling grace. Lyra, enough. Greg is trying to unravel a complex web. He needs assistance, not accusations. She turned to Greg, her large, multifaceted eyes gleaming with curiosity. I may also be of assistance. While reviewing the data logs, I discovered a hidden file. It appears to be coded. Hours blurred into a frenzy of numbers, regulations, and increasingly complex algorithms. Greg, Nova, Thea worked side by side in the brightly lit office. The next day, Greg decided to take a break and explore the city. As he wandered through a bustling marketplace, filled with exotic fruits and strange alien trinkets, Greg reached out to examine a beautifully crafted ceremonial artifact. It was a smooth, obsidian sphere resting on a pedestal, radiating a faint warmth. The moment his fingers brushed against its surface, a low, guttural murmur swept through the crowd. Faces turned towards him, their expressions ranging from shock to outright hostility. Nova appeared at his side, her face tight with concern. Greg, no, you must not touch the SHLAR, it is sacred. Greg recoiled, his face burning with embarrassment. I didn't know, there wasn't a sign or anything. Nova gently took his arm, guiding him away from the angry crowd. Elysian customs are nuanced. The SHLAR is only touched by those of pure Elysian blood during specific ceremonies. Touching it otherwise is considered a grave offense. She paused, her expression softening. I will explain more later, but for now we should leave. Later, back at the estate, Lyra found Greg attempting a series of basic stretches in the training room, his movements clumsy and awkward. She watched for a moment, a hint of amusement in her multifaceted eyes. You move like a grog bear with 2 left feet, human. Greg straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. Thanks, I'm not exactly a seasoned warrior. Lyra sighed, a sound like air hissing through vents. Perhaps I could offer some instruction. Basic Elysian self-defense. It might keep you alive long enough to understand Carl's affairs. Over the next few days, Lyra put Greg through a rigorous training regime. He stumbled, he sweated, he cursed under his breath, but he persisted. During a brief respite, Lyra paused and looked at Greg. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Why risk your life for a man you barely knew? Greg hesitated. Carl, he saw something in me, something good, and he trusted me. I can't let him down. He paused. He also saved me from a dead-end accounting job. Lyra's gaze softened. Carl saved my life as well. Years ago, a band of space pirates raided my village. I was just a youngling, barely able to hold a blade. Carl arrived with his security force and drove them off. I owe him everything. Meanwhile, Thea had been working tirelessly to crack the coded messages. Finally, after days of relentless effort, she succeeded. The screen flickered, revealing a series of encrypted commands and financial transactions. I've done it, she announced, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. The messages indicate that Carl was secretly funding a rebellion against a corrupt Elysian corporation. They call themselves the Obsidian Syndicate. Greg, his accounting instincts kicking in, cross-referenced the syndicate's name with Carl's financial records. His eyes widened. I've found it. Carl was funneling vast sums of money through a series of shell corporations, and I can trace where that money went. It all leads back to Iridian Industries. Iridian Industries was one of the most powerful corporations on Elysium, controlled by a ruthless businessman named Iridian. The next day, as Greg left the estate, a sleek black vehicle pulled up beside him. 2 hulking figures emerged, their faces obscured by tinted visors. Gregory Green, one of them growled, his voice distorted by a modulator. Iridian Industries suggests you cease your inquiries immediately. Greg stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. Tell Iridian I'm not easily intimidated. The figures exchanged a glance. You have been warned. They turned and disappeared back into the vehicle, which sped away, leaving Greg shaken but resolute. That evening, Nova approached Greg, her expression troubled. I have learned something disturbing from my contacts. Iridian is not only interested in Carl's finances, he is also obsessed with acquiring his latest invention. Greg and Thea descended into the depths of the estate, following a series of winding corridors that led to Carl's private laboratory. The room was a marvel of alien technology, filled with humming devices, glowing screens, and strange, unidentifiable objects. In the center of the room stood a large metallic device, pulsating with energy. "This," Thea said, her voice filled with awe, "is Carl's masterpiece, a device that can manipulate energy on a planetary scale." "What does that even mean?" Greg asked, overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of the technology. Thea hesitated. It could be used to generate limitless clean energy, solve the planet's environmental problems, even create new worlds. But it could also be used as a weapon of unimaginable power. Lyra entered the lab, her face grim. Iridian has a history of exploiting alien technology for personal gain. He cares nothing for the consequences. If he gets his hands on this device, Elysium will be at his mercy. Greg looked at Nova, Lyra, and Thea, a sense of perseverance hardening his features. "Then we can't let that happen." Later that night, Greg found Nova gazing out at the city lights, her expression pensive. "I'm not sure I'm worthy of this, Nova, of Carl's trust, of your respect." Nova turned to him, her eyes filled with warmth. "Carl chose you, Greg, because he saw something special in you, something that Elysians often lack, a sense of fairness, a genuine desire to do good." Suddenly, a holographic message flickered to life on a nearby console. It was Carl, his image slightly distorted but unmistakably him. "If you are seeing this, Greg, it means I am gone. And that someone is trying to steal what I have left behind. Trust your instincts, Greg. You are more capable than you realize." As Greg deciphered the last part of Carl's message, a klaxon blared through the laboratory. Red lights flashed and the doors slammed shut with a resounding thud. A synthesized voice announced, "Security lockdown initiated. Intrusion detected. Grip on his." "Freedom? I think I have something," Greg muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. He'd scavenged a discarded diagnostic cable, essentially a glorified wire from a nearby workbench. Their security relies on layered encryption, but the physical access panel, that looks almost laughably simple. Thea, her multifaceted eyes focused on the holographic schematics projected from her wrist-mounted device, tilted her head. "Human systems are so primitive, yet you believe you can bypass Elysian protocols with this." Her tone was skeptical, but a flicker of hope danced within her gaze. "Primitive, maybe, but universal. Everyone cuts corners somewhere." Greg jammed the cable into the access panel. Sparks flew, momentarily plunging the lab into darkness. "Think of it as a backdoor. Every system has one, even if they don't realize it." He manipulated the cable, shorting out a series of circuits in a precise sequence he'd gleaned from the schematics. A low hum filled the room as the door hissed open. Thea stared at Greg, a mixture of disbelief and admiration on her face. "Remarkable, you bypassed a Class 7 security system with scrap." Greg grinned, wiping his brow. "Never underestimate the power of a good paperclip, or in this case, a diagnostic cable." Nova met them outside the lab, her expression grim. "Iridian is already leveraging your cultural missteps. The Elysian Council is unhappy. He's painted you as an ignorant outsider unfit to inherit Carl's legacy. Your movements are restricted." Greg's lips pursed. "Restricted? I'm being grounded." Lyra, leaning against the wall, her arms crossed, observed Greg's mounting frustration. Perhaps a lesson in self-defense is in order, Elysian style. The following day, Lyra led Greg to a training platform overlooking a vast, crimson canyon. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, making each step a challenge. "Elysian combat is about adaptation," Lyra explained, handing Greg a shimmering energy blade. "Here, gravity is a weapon, not a constraint." Greg stumbled, nearly losing his balance. Easier said than done. Lyra smirked, activating her own blade. Indeed, Carl believed that true strength came not from brute force but from understanding your opponent, their weaknesses, and their motivations. He was considered eccentric for it. She lunged, her movements fluid and graceful despite the shifting gravity. Greg parried clumsily, the energy blade humming in his hand. Eccentric. That's putting it mildly. He left me his fortune and 3 wives. Lyra disarmed him with ease. He saw potential in you, Greg, a potential to challenge the stagnant norms of Elysian society. Carl eaved in. Revolution of a sort, a revolution of thought. Back at the estate, Thea was poring over financial records, her brow furrowed. Iridian rerouted significant funds to offshore accounts just weeks before Carl's death. These transactions, they are obscured by layers of shell corporations. Greg, reviewing the data streams Thea projected, pointed to a specific transfer. This one. This leads to a holding company registered on Xylos, and Xylos is a Viro Corporation hub. Suddenly, Greg's comm chimed. An unknown number. He accepted the call. A smooth, androgynous voice filled his ear. Greg Green, my name is Representative Rowe. I represent the Viro Corporation. We understand you have inherited certain assets. We believe a mutually beneficial arrangement could be accommodating. Greg frowned. What kind of arrangement? Access to Carl Sci's invention. In exchange, shall we say, for certain protections and assistance in navigating the complexities of Elysian law. Greg ended the call and immediately began researching the Viro Corporation. The results were chilling. Ruthless acquisitions, exploited labor, and a reputation for bending laws or breaking them to their will. Protections. Greg repeated, more to himself than the wives. Sounds more like a protection racket. He reactivated his comm and contacted Representative Rowe. I'm listening, but I need specifics, and I need to understand exactly what you expect in return. He focused on the representative's vocal patterns, analyzing them for tells, subtle indicators of deception. A human trick he'd learned from countless hours of poker. While Thea continued to analyze the financial records, Greg delved into Carl's personal research notes. He discovered that the invention wasn't just about interstellar travel. It was originally designed to reverse the effects of a catastrophic environmental disaster that had ravaged Elysium centuries ago. Later that evening, Nova took Greg to a secluded restaurant overlooking the shimmering Elysian cityscape. Soft music played and the air was filled with the scent of exotic blooms. Carl, he saved me from indentured servitude, Nova confessed, her voice soft. I was indebted to a crime syndicate. He saw something in me that no one else did. He paid off my debt, no questions asked. Thea interrupted the date with an urgent message. Greg, I have completed the simulation. Using Carl's invention, we can restore Elysium to its former glory. Vast forests, clear skies. A paradise. She sent Greg a holographic projection. A vibrant green Elysium teeming with life. It was a stark contrast to the industrialized world outside the restaurant window. The next day, Lyra guided Greg to a remote location, far from the gleaming cities. A simple stone monument stood in a clearing, adorned with faded photographs. This is a memorial, Lyra explained, her voice somber, to those who died during the space pirate raid where Carl saved my life. He was just a scientist then, but he fought like a warrior to protect us. Greg reviewed the financial records again, a new piece of information clicking into place. Iridian. He didn't just profit from Carl's death. He profited from the need for Carl's invention. He found encrypted data packets detailing the deliberate release of industrial pollutants into the Elysian atmosphere, timed perfectly to coincide with Iridian's acquisition of pollution scrubbing technology. His comm chimed again. This time, a coded message from an anonymous source. Iridian plans to seize control of the invention by force. Be warned. As Greg walked back to the estate, a shadow detached itself from the alleyway. Two figures clad in black armor materialized before him, energy weapons drawn. "Give us the key component," one growled, his voice distorted by a modulator. Greg didn't hesitate. He sprinted in the opposite direction, dodging laser fire. He was fast, but they were faster. A searing pain ripped through his leg and he stumbled, falling to the ground. The figures loomed over him. One reached for his pocket, extracting a small, crystalline module, a crucial component of Carl's invention. "Sorry, human," the figure sneered. "Your little game is over." Greg's head swam, a dull throb echoing behind his eyes. He blinked, the blurred shapes resolving into Thea's concerned face hovering above him. The antiseptic tang of her lab filled his nostrils, a stark contrast to the metallic scent of blood that still clung to his clothes. Lyra stood beside her, a faint shimmer around her hand, some kind of biohealing field, he guessed. His side throbbed, a dull, persistent ache. "Easy," Thea murmured, her three-fingered hand gently pressing against his temple. "You took a nasty hit." Nova knelt beside him, her golden eyes filled with an urgency that cut through his confusion. Iridian stole the atmospheric regulator. Without it, Carl's terraforming device can't maintain Elysium's atmospheric balance. Her words hit him like a physical blow. The terraforming device. It wasn't just some fancy project, it was the planet's life support. He sat up, wincing. Iridian had planned this. He hadn't just wanted to hurt Greg, he'd wanted to cripple Elysium. A cold knot formed in his stomach. "He knew exactly where to hit us, didn't he?" He looked from Nova to Lyra to Thea. He knew what we were planning, what that component was for. A wave of paranoia washed over him. Someone close to Carl, someone they trusted, had betrayed them. Greg pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the protests of his bruised ribs. He needed to see the security footage. "Show me the lab surveillance," he said, his voice raspy. Thea didn't hesitate, bringing up the holographic display. Greg watched, his human mind focusing on the smallest details, the subtle shifts in posture, the micro-expressions that betrayed intent. He replayed a segment focusing on one of Carl's oldest associates, a portly Elysian named Rel. Rel had seemed genuinely concerned after the attack, offering condolences and assistance. But Greg noticed something. Rel's hand had lingered a fraction too long near the regulator's housing before the attack, almost as if disabling a security lock. As Greg was reviewing the footage, his comm chimed. It was the Viro representative. "Mr. Green," the Viro's voice oozed synthetic charm. "A regrettable incident. However, our offer still stands. In light of this setback, we are prepared to increase our contribution to tenfold in exchange for the rights to Carl's technology." It was a devil's bargain. Save Elysium now, but potentially doom it to Viro control later. "I need time to consider," Greg said, his mind racing. He ended the call and turned to Nova. "I need you to arrange a private meeting with the Viro representative, somewhere secure and discreet." He saw the question in her eyes, but she nodded. "Of course, Greg, I'll make the arrangements." The meeting took place in a neutral location, a shimmering observation platform overlooking the sprawling Elysian capital. Greg stalled, asking questions about the Viro Corporation's plans, probing for weaknesses. Meanwhile, Nova, using her extensive network of contacts, was digging into Viro's past. What she found was chilling. "Greg," she said urgently over the comm, her voice tight with controlled fury. "The Viro Corporation doesn't care about Elysium. They want to exploit the environmental crisis for profit. They've suppressed similar disasters on other planets, profiting from the chaos." He relayed the information to Lyra and Thea when he returned, the hollow display flickering with Viro's incriminating evidence. A tense silence filled the lab. "So we fight Iridian and Viro?" Lyra asked, her hand instinctively moving towards the hilt of her energy sword. "Alone," Thea added, her brow furrowed in thought. "Not entirely alone," Lyra said, her voice low. "Carl." He wasn't naive. He knew there were those who would try to exploit Elysium. He had a hidden cache of weapons and technology designed as a last resort. Greg's mind snapped into focus. He had a plan, a risky one, but it might just work. The Viro Corporation wants Carl's technology and they're willing to do anything to get it. We use that greed against them. He paused, a glint in his eyes. We lure them into a trap. His understanding of human greed, a trait perhaps frowned upon, but also a tool, was about to become Elysium's advantage. Nova, in the meantime, reached out to a rival Elysian corporation, one that had long been overshadowed by Carl's success. She offered them a partnership, a chance to share in the benefits of Carl's technology if they helped them stop Iridian and the Viro Corporation. She used their pride, their ambition, and their fear of being left behind as leverage. Under the cover of darkness, Greg, Lyra, and Thea prepared to infiltrate Iridian's headquarters. Lyra moved with a silent grace, her energy soared, humming with power. Thea, her fingers flying across her datapad, disabled security sensors and rerouted surveillance feeds. They moved as a unit, a formidable team. They found Iridian in his private office, surrounded by guards. "So," Greg said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "I know about your conspiracy, Iridian. I know you sabotaged Carl's project." Iridian sneered. "You're a fool, human. You never understood what Carl was doing. He was a threat to Elysium, to our way of life." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Rel, Carl's old friend. "I tried to warn you, Greg," Rel said, his voice tinged with regret. "But you wouldn't listen." Rel raised a device, a small metallic sphere. "This will stop you." He lunged forward, activating the device. An EMP blast erupted, engulfing the room. Lyra moved faster than Greg could see, throwing herself in front of him. The EMP hit her full force, her body convulsing as her energy shield flickered and died. Thea, reacting instantly, worked feverishly at the controls of a nearby console. With a surge of power, she managed to bypass the damage Rel had caused, temporarily stabilizing the atmosphere. But in the chaos, Iridian slipped away, disappearing into the labyrinthine corridors of his headquarters, the atmospheric regulator clutched in his hand. Greg knelt beside Lyra, his heart pounding with fear. "Lyra, are you all right?" She groaned, her body still trembling. "I'll live," she said, her voice weak. But he got away. The weight of failure crashed down on Greg. He had underestimated Iridian, trusted the wrong people, and now Elysium was on the brink of disaster. The attack and Lyra's near death had taken a toll. The wives, though supportive, couldn't hide their concern. "Greg," Nova said gently, "are you sure you're up to this? This isn't some accounting problem you can solve with spreadsheets. This is war." Greg looked at their faces, at the worry etched into their features. He saw the doubt in their eyes, the unspoken question. Had Carl made a mistake? Had he chosen the wrong person to inherit his legacy? He stood up, his eyes hardened. He didn't know if he was up to this, but he wasn't going to back down. He would find Iridian, recover the atmospheric regulator, and prove to them and to himself that he was worthy of Carl's trust. "I'm going to find him," he said, his voice hard. "And I'm going to make him pay." Greg knelt beside Lyra, his brow furrowed as he examined the shimmering violet wound on her arm. "This isn't good, Lyra. You need rest." Lyra winced but waved off his concern with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Iridian won't rest, Greg. We need to find him." Her voice was strained, each word edged with pain. "My tracking skills are still functional." She gripped the hilt of her energy blade, her fist clenched. "Let me help." Driven by guilt over Lyra's injury and a burning persistence to stop Iridian, Greg relented. "All right, but you stay behind me. No heroics." Meanwhile, in Carl's lab, Thea meticulously scanned the residue left by the EMP blast. Her delicate, multi-jointed fingers danced across the holographic display, analyzing the energy signatures. "Greg," she called out, her voice tight with controlled fury, "the EMP was modified. The mole. He didn't just want to disable the security. He wanted to kill us." The holographic display showed the modified energy signature, a jagged spike of lethal power. "He amplified the destructive frequency." Greg's face hardened. He marched down to the holding cells where the mole was incarcerated. The cell was barely lit, casting long, distorted shadows on the prisoner's face. "Why?" Greg demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Why try to kill us?" The mole, a jittery Elysian with shifty eyes, cowered in the corner. "Iridian, he promised me a share. Elysium has resources, rich resources. He said the Viro Corporation would make us all rich." Greed, a depressingly familiar human failing, had been the motive. "He also mentioned something else," the mole continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Carl. He always kept personal logs. There's a coded message hidden inside. Something about a failsafe. A moon." Back in the lab, Greg and Thea pored over Carl's encrypted logs. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a seemingly impenetrable mess. Thea, however, recognized a recurring pattern, a series of prime numbers embedded within the text. "It's a cipher," she murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "A simple substitution code based on Carl's birth date." Within minutes, the coded message was revealed. Project Nightingale, Lunar Facility, coordinates 47-3 Beta. While Greg and Thea were deciphering codes, Nova was facing a storm of political fallout. In the Elysian Council chamber, accusations flew like poisoned darts. "You vouched for this human," Councillor Valerius thundered, his voice echoing through the hall. "You brought him into our home, and now we suffer the consequences. Iridian's attack, the mole's betrayal. This is all because of your recklessness." Nova stood tall, her violet eyes blazing with defiance. "I acted in the best interests of Elysium," she retorted, her voice ringing with authority. "I believed and still believe that Greg Green can help us." The mole's actions were his own, not a reflection of Greg's character. Greg and Thea, meanwhile, were aboard Carl's private shuttle, hurtling towards the remote moon indicated in the logs. As they approached the coordinates, a hidden structure shimmered into view, cloaked by advanced stealth technology. "This is it," Greg said, his voice filled with anticipation. "Carl's secret research facility." As they disembarked and approached the entrance, the ground beneath their feet hummed with latent energy. Suddenly, laser grids snapped into existence, crisscrossing the pathway. "Booby traps," Thea warned, her eyes scanning the environment. Carl wasn't taking any chances. Greg, remembering his days playing puzzle games as a kid, took point. He carefully studied the laser patterns, identifying the sequence and timing. "Thea, I need you to reroute the power grid. There's a junction box to your left." Working in perfect sync, they disarmed the laser grid, then navigated a series of pressure plates and sonic sensors. Their combined ingenuity and teamwork were essential to bypass Carl's elaborate defenses. Inside the facility, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and forgotten experiments. Rows of deactivated robots stood silently in the shadows, their metallic bodies gleaming in the dim light. Greg found a dusty terminal and activated it. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a series of journals written by Carl himself. "Listen to this," Greg said, reading aloud. "I suspect Iridian's ambition will eventually lead him to betray me. He craves power and he sees Elysium as a means to an end. Therefore, I have developed a countermeasure, a safeguard to protect our planet from his greed." A glimmer of hope flickered in Greg's eyes. He knew. Thea scrolled through another journal entry. "Here's something else. The component Iridian stole. It's not just for atmospheric stabilization. It's a key element in a planetary defense system. Carl designed it to protect Elysium from orbital attacks." The stakes had just been raised exponentially. Greg immediately contacted Nova. "Nova, the component Iridian stole. It's part of a planetary defense system. He's planning something big." Nova, armed with this new information, addressed the Elysian Council once more. "Iridian's actions are not just about personal gain," she declared, her voice resonating with newfound conviction. "He is working with the Viro Corporation to exploit Elysium's resources and enslave our people. We must unite against this threat." This time, her words resonated. The council, finally understanding the gravity of the situation, pledged their support. Back on the moon, Lyra, despite her injury, was adamant. "I'm coming with you," she insisted, her voice firm. "Iridian is dangerous, you'll need my skills." Greg hesitated. "Lyra, you're hurt, you need to stay here and rest." "And let you face Iridian alone," she retorted, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Never." As Greg considered Lyra's stubborn persistence, a message came through on his comm unit. It was the Viro representative, his voice smooth and wily. "Mr. Green, I understand you've discovered Carl's secret facility. We are willing to offer you our assistance in exchange for exclusive access to Carl's inventions." Greg felt a knot of suspicion tighten in his stomach. "What kind of assistance?" "We can provide you with resources, manpower. Anything you need to stop Iridian," the representative replied, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Think of Team Mr. Possibilities, Mr. Green. With our help, you could secure Elysium's future, and your own." Suspecting a trap, Greg decided to play along. "All right," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm willing to meet, but I have some conditions." He glanced at Thea, a silent understanding passing between them. He planned to use this meeting to gather evidence, to expose the Viro Corporation's involvement with Iridian. At the designated meeting point, a deserted mining outpost on the moon's surface, Greg met with the Viro representative. He activated a hidden recording device just after the man arrived. "Mr. Green," the representative said, extending a gloved hand, "I'm glad we could come to an understanding." "I want to be clear about something," Greg replied, his voice steady. "I'm only interested in protecting Elysium." "The Mr. Representative chuckled. "Of course, Mr. Green, and we are here to help you do just that. Iridian is a rogue element, a threat to our mutual interests. We simply want to ensure that Elysium's resources are used responsibly, and that the Viro Corporation receives its fair share." He had walked right into the trap. Greg had his confession. Suddenly, the ground trembled, explosions rocked the mining outpost, alarms blared. "Iridian!" Lyra shouted, drawing her energy blade. "He's attacking the facility." Greg, Lyra, and Thea raced back to Carl's research facility, weapons drawn. Iridian's forces were already breaching the outer defenses, laser fire scorching the landscape. The facility, once a haven of scientific discovery, was now a battlefield. "He's trying to destroy everything," Thea yelled over the din of battle. "He wants to prevent us from activating the defense system." Greg, Lyra, and Thea fought side by side, utilizing Carl's booby traps and the facility's defenses to hold off Iridian's forces. Lyra, despite her injury, moved with surprising speed and agility, her energy blade slicing through the air. Thea, armed with a plasma rifle, provided covering fire, her aim surprisingly accurate. Greg, relying on his quick thinking and resourcefulness, set off a series of explosions, creating chaos and confusion among the enemy ranks. But the relentless assault took its toll. Lyra stumbled, clutching her injured arm. A searing pain shot through her body. I can't hold on much longer," she gasped. Greg faced a terrible choice. He could stay and protect Lyra, or he could leave her and help Thea activate the planetary defense system. Every instinct screamed at him to protect the injured woman, but the fate of Elysium hung in the balance. "Thea," Greg said, his voice tight with emotion, "get to the control room. Activate the defense system. I'll cover you." Thea nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Be careful, Greg." Greg turned back to Lyra, shielding her from the incoming fire. "I'm not leaving you, Lyra. Just hold on." He knew he was buying Thea time, but he also knew he was risking everything. Thea reached the control room and frantically worked to bypass the security protocols. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across the screen. Finally, with a triumphant cry, she activated the planetary defense system. A powerful energy beam shot into the sky, repelling Iridian's attacking ships. But the activation also triggered an unexpected side effect. a planetary energy surge. The facility hummed with raw power. The air crackled with electricity. "What's happening?" Greg shouted. "The defense system is amplifying Carl's inventions," Thea replied, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "It's creating both opportunities and dangers. We've never seen anything like this before." Iridian, defeated but not broken, managed to escape in a heavily armored transport. But before he fled, he planted a virus in Carl's systems, a final act of spiteful sabotage. As Iridian's ship disappeared into the blackness of space, Thea turned to Greg, her face pale. "He planted a virus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's targeting the planetary defense system. If it works, Elysium will be defenseless." The looming crisis hung heavy in the air. Thea's violet eyes widened, reflecting the flashing red alerts on her console. "Greg, the virus. It's not just targeting the financial systems. It's designed to overload the planetary defense grid, a chain reaction. It would destabilize Elysium's atmosphere." Her voice trembled, the gravity of the situation hitting her hard. "Iridian intends to poison our skies." Greg's brow furrowed, his mind racing. "Wait a minute. That sounds familiar. There was this old Earth sci-fi movie. Planetary Lockdown, I think it was called. They used a similar virus. The only way to stop it was a specific type of code injection, a bypass that rerouted the energy flow." Thea's fingers flew across the console. "It's risky, but it might work. I can adapt their code." Moments later, she looked up, her expression grim. "It's buying us time, Greg, maybe an hour, but the virus core. It's shielded. We need to physically remove it from the main control system." Meanwhile, Nova, her voice ringing with authority, addressed the Elysian Council. Holographic images flickered around the chamber as she presented irrefutable evidence of Viro Corporation's involvement. "This is an act of war against Elysium. Iridian acted on Viro's behalf." The council chamber erupted in outrage. A vote of no confidence was quickly called, resulting in crippling sanctions against Viro Corporation, solidifying Elysium's political unity against the threat. Lyra, her arm still in a sling, stood beside Greg, her face etched with drive. "I'm going with you." "Lyra, you're injured," Greg protested. "And I am also a warrior," she retorted, her voice firm. "I will provide tactical support." "Cover fire." Together, they infiltrated Iridian's ship. Lyra, despite her injury, moved with surprising agility, taking down guards with swift, precise movements. Her unwavering loyalty was a shield against the chaos. Greg reached the control room, confronting Iridian, who stood smirking amidst the flashing consoles. "You meddling human, you have no idea what you've stumbled into." "I know you're planning to sell Elysium's resources to the highest bidder after you've destroyed the planet," Greg countered, his voice steady. "Greed, that's all it ever is with you people." Iridian laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you can stop me? I have power beyond your comprehension." "You're arrogant, Iridian," Greg said, a glint in his eye. "You underestimate humans. We're adaptable, resourceful, and we know a thing or two about exploiting weaknesses." Greg baited Iridian, playing on his ego, goading him into revealing his security protocols. As Iridian postured, Greg noticed a subtle flicker in his energy shield, a blind spot he'd seen in countless action vids. With a swift move, Greg disabled Iridian's personal shield with a pulse disruptor, leaving him vulnerable. He retrieved the virus core, a pulsating crystal radiating malevolent energy. Back on Elysium, Thea worked feverishly. As Greg transmitted the virus core's deactivation code, she redirected the planetary defense system, creating a stable energy field around Elysium. The atmospheric instability subsided, the skies clearing to reveal the familiar twin suns. News of Viro Corporation's treachery spread like wildfire across the galaxy. A galactic investigation was launched, promising severe sanctions and a complete overhaul of interstellar trade regulations. Days later, Greg stood with Nova, Lyra, and Thea on a balcony overlooking the revitalized Elysian landscape. The air was clean, the sky vibrant. Nova placed her hand on her abdomen, a radiant smile gracing her lips. "Greg, I'm pregnant." Greg's heart swelled with joy. "That's incredible." Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand on Greg's shoulder. "You are one of us, Greg, family." Thea nodded in agreement. "We are stronger together." Greg gazed at them, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He realized then that Carl hadn't chosen him for his accounting skills. He'd chosen him for his inherent human values: compassion, adaptability, and fairness. Carl had seen something special in humanity, a potential for good that transcended species. Together, they decided to use Carl's fortune and inventions to promote peace and understanding throughout the galaxy, to fund research, build bridges, and foster cooperation. Elysium would become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of unity. The final scene showed them working together in Carl's lab. Greg, meticulously reviewing financial projections for a new galactic peace initiative. Nova, skillfully negotiating trade agreements between warring factions. Lyra, training a new generation of Elysian peacekeepers in defensive combat strategies. Thea, tirelessly working on Carl's research, unlocking the secrets of interstellar harmony. They were a family, bound by love, loyalty, and a shared vision for a better future. Carl's legacy lived on, not just in his invention,